That music only means one thing. It's the MAP. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the MAP, the Mental Health and Addiction Podcast. I'm Andy Bernstein. I am. And this weekly podcast is about open and honest discussions around mental health and addiction, which is obviously an important topic that currently affects 1 in 5 Americans. And let's get right to it and meet our panel. Kris Long, who's normally with us, is here in spirit. She might drop in, she might not, but of course, Willie Drinkwater is here. Willie, who are you? Tell us who you are.
Who am I and what am I doing here? All the existential questions, right?
That's right.
I've been in the field of mental health and addiction for over 32 years now. I have a private practice up in Beverly. Actually, it's out of my home now because everything is teletherapy now. And then I'm also an educator for UMass Boston in the Addiction Counseling Education Program. And before the COVID, I would go out nationally to lecture on substance abuse and co-occurring disorders. So,
And you've been in the field for how long?
32 years plus. So.
And you do a lot of work with a lot of different people up in the North Shore, but you're then as you said, you teach classes as well on the addiction certification.
Oh yeah, I mean my background was the detoxes, and then I did a 15-year stint in my career of inpatient psych addiction. That's where I was like, there's more to this drinking and drugging than just drinking and drugging. So
right, you really specialize a lot in co-occurring disorders and
yes,
which is mental health and the addiction. So there's two different
dual diagnosis is the expectation in addiction, not the exception.
Trauma, grief, abandonment.
The big three, the trifecta, as I call it.
That's right.
Show me anyone that's been in the detox 10 or 15 times, and I'll show you somebody that has a mental health piece that hasn't been addressed.
There you go. It's a symptom. The addiction is a symptom and not the cause.
Yes.
All right. As for me, I've been in media for over 25 years, and I created a show called Crosscheck Radio, and I used to host with former hockey player Kevin Stevens, which was about addiction, and featured a lot of different guests trying to really do a great job in ending the stigma around addiction and, having open, honest discussions. And, of course, hope.
And I had the privilege to be on the panel. So
that's right. That's right. Actually, I saw our cousin, your niece yesterday, which we'll talk about later. But
yes,
we're gonna meet our special guest, Linda Mautner, in a few. But before we start our conversation with Linda, let's take a few minutes. I wanted to talk about what's going out there in the world of addiction with Kris and Willie. But Kris isn't here, but she'll be here soon. In today's Washington Post, there's an article, and it says that after a 1-year drop in 2018, U.S. opioid overdose deaths increased again in 2019, topping 50,000 for the first time, according to the CDC, which accounted for the majority of the 71,000 fatal overdoses. The national data is not available for 2020. However, they're saying that this could be actually an all-time high this year. Obviously because of the COVID, and the article also makes a great point talking about Hunter Biden's struggle with addiction was brief, and there was no discussion about it and what their plans are to fight the opioid crisis during the recent debate. And so it looks like they may be taking the eye off their ball a little bit, but then what they were saying is a lot of moms out there are doing GoFundMe pages so they can actually have the money to bury their children who have overdosed. And they're saying some parents have even reserved a casket while their child is still alive, so they're prepared what they believe is the inevitable. So I throw this over to you, Willie. What are you seeing out there right now? Is this an accurate portrayal?
I'm seeing an increase in everything. I mean, particularly up on the North Shore where I am, I'm seeing a real rise in alcohol again. Yeah, I mean, alcohol is, North Shore affluent society. There's no alcoholics. There's just problem drinkers or those that can't hold their liquor. And that's one of the predominant themes that have run over the years. It's country club and yacht club time. So it's like, no, it's just, there's no alcoholics. But yeah, it's getting progressively worse. I mean, I'm seeing it, and if we get a next round of stimulus checks out, or unemployment and stuff, people in early recovery in particular, that's a major setup, because all of a sudden they have cash in their pocket, and it's like, hey, maybe I'm not quite ready yet. And yeah, I mean, it's just a disaster. It's a major setup and stuff. So.
But are you seeing fentanyl, heroin?
Yeah. I
Was
mean,
it
I see that too, and stuff. It all depends how far up on the North Shore you go. It's if you're in the coastal if you're in the real coastal areas on the northern part of the North Shore, yeah, it's just rampant. Fentanyl and everything else. So meth is
so?
on the rise too. Meth is
That's what
on
we
the
were
rise.
talking about. But I think it's important that we keep talking about it to let people know that this is increasing and it's not going away. And even if we don't talk about it, it's not going away. Kris Perry Long, also on the front lines. Hi, Kris. Who are you? Tell us who you are.
Kris Long. I am a family educator with Aware Recovery Care, which is an in-home addiction treatment program. It just opened up in Massachusetts, started in Connecticut. It's a 52-week program, and what we do is we meet our clients where they live. So that could be a sober home, that could be on their own with their family, whatever. We meet them
Not at their house, but actually where they are
where
in
they
their
where they live. We actually do like
home
physical
visit.
visits. Yep.
So what are you seeing out? What are you seeing out there, my friend?
A lot of alcohol. People are starting to kind of come out of their cocoons. I don't think it's going to last because our numbers in Massachusetts are going up, and
Yeah.
I think people are going to go back into fear. But they're starting to come out, and they're starting to be required to go, to work for a couple of days, to check in the office, and now they're having to deal with the fact that they can't take their, rocks glass with them. So a lot of alcohol. We're still seeing the RIPS on Facebook. They're going back up. They're going back up.
Deaths. When you
Yes.
said,
Yeah.
do you agree that there should have been some conversation the other night about Hunter Biden as talking about his addiction during debate? Do you feel like that should have been something that was an opportunity to really expand the discussion, or do you feel like they don't even have a plan?
I think that everybody is so guarded and so preoccupied that nobody wants to open Pandora's box. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't think if they open Pandora's box and they start that conversation, they're going to be able to be true to it, because everybody's on attack. Everybody's looking for that, you didn't wear your mask in that event. And, I think that it's just a muck. And I voted already. I went
So
to my
did
town
I.
hall.
So did I.
I went to my town hall the other day and I voted and I got it done with. And it's such a relief to be done, to not have that hanging over my head, to not have to go into that environment where there are people.
You don't know. You
Right?
don't know.
Right? I mean, it was just like, I highly recommend it. If you have the opportunity in your town, go and vote. It's
It's
weight
cathartic.
off your shoulder.
It's good.
Yeah.
I took that marker and I put it down on paper and I scribbled so hard to get that. I was like aggression.
I went Sunday. Yeah.
Was it an aggression? Like, that anyway. All right. So I just think, like I said, I think it's important that we keep that up front and center, because we still have a problem and it's not going away. And, and like I said, the newspapers and, the articles out there are saying that it is going to get worse. So having said that, let's meet our guest today. I'm going to let Willie do the honors. Can you introduce who our special
Linda
guest
Mautner,
is?
welcome in. The big reason I wanted Linda to come on too is I don't know if Andy and Kris, if you've been seeing those ads on TV. It's an Army veteran, and he was talking about how they were loading him up with opiates for chronic pain. But now that he's discovered kratom, his life is happy, joyous, and free. And kratom isn't this little innocent herb, which Linda will elaborate on. But it goes across 3 different classifications of drugs. It can be a depressant, it can be a stimulant, and in excess, it can be a hallucinogen. And stuff.
Okay.
It's not the innocent herb that it's made out to be. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda, because she has a foundation down there in Florida. and I'd like her to talk all about the story. Hello, Linda.
She's on mute.
Oh, she's on mute?
Yeah. But you should be on mute, but she's on mute.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
There we go.
There
Okay,
you
now
go.
we can.
There
Yeah.
you go.
You're all
Okay.
set.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. Yeah, and my son, Ian, I want to introduce him. He was 20. My son took his life on Kratom by diving off of an overpass onto I-95, throwing his body over an overpass. I still can't wrap my head around that, you know? I mean, his addiction to Kratom basically started in the summer of 2011. And by 2014, he was gone. So that's how quickly all of this happened and whipped through our lives and tore everything to shreds pretty much. But his addiction was starting out, first of all, I'm a person in long-term recovery for 26 years from alcohol addiction. And my son knew that, and he was super proud of me. I got sober for my son. And, it was like, he started going to this kava bar with his friends. He was super popular. He was a super smart young man in high school, in a magnet program at Boca Community High in South Florida. And he was going down on the avenue, walking there, having pizza and stuff like that. And they just decided one night to go into a kava bar, and they went in, and it was cool because, the ambiance was really set for like a younger group. And it was, they gave you drinks in a coconut shell. And my son wasn't a drug user. He wasn't somebody seeking drugs for relief. He was a really good, I shouldn't say good, because, people that use drugs are good too. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I mean, we're good people. People that abuse or misuse substances, we're good people.
Yeah. It isn't about good or bad. It's about healthy or unhealthy. Healthy or unhealthy. Yeah.
But he wasn't a person seeking relief from life, basically. He did have issues with some anxiety because he was getting to that age where he was approaching college. And there were a lot of things a lot of goals he had at that time to get, they kind of push you towards the end of high school. So he had a lot of pressures. And he went in there, though, to have fun. He thought, well, this is legal. This is something they were telling him at the kava bar. This is herbal. This will help you relax. It's not alcohol. It's not, it's not drugs. This is like safe. It's an herbal substance. It's coming from the leaf of a tree. It's ground up. It's natural. It's something you can drink. It'll help you feel good. It'll help you feel relaxed. You're not going to like a bar to get drunk. And so with all of those things in mind, knowing about my history and about the fact that this ran on all sides of our family, he basically thought he was safe. And not only that, but he was in the public. He was at a place that, was commercialized, and he assumed that whatever was there was going to be safe for him to consume. And going there repeatedly, like he went back. His friends tried it that night. They said they vomited after, some of them. But Ian kept kind of getting back in there. And a lot of that could have been, a genetic predisposition for this disease, like a setting up of it. But he was aware of the fact that that we had this in our family.
How did it? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
So how did it? What were the? So Kratom is obviously, as you mentioned, it's an over-the-counter, or you can buy it at like a 7-Eleven or different places. So it is like as you said, a legal drug, but what makes it? What's the dangers behind it? How does it? Chemically, what does it do? Chris was
So-
raised a,
You can't buy it. You used to be able to buy it. Willie, correct me if I'm wrong. You used to be able to buy it in all like the 7-Elevens and everything else. But if you remember a few years ago, there was a Patriot player that was running around and he was
Chandler Jones.
Yeah. Well, he lived in town and he bought it from the little mini mart that's right next to Dairy Queen. And it had been banned, but like it wasn't enforced. And so I think it was one of those things like late breaking news, you're not allowed to sell it. So I think it's been banned, but you can buy it on Amazon.
Right. Or
Yeah.
nutrition stores sell it too, though, right? GNC.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure about that, but yeah.
Okay. So from a chemical standpoint, what does it actually do? What did it do to Ian? How did it, what was the,
Manifestation.
yeah, how did it trigger? How did it respond to his body or psychic, mental?
Well, he basically got in the beginning, we didn't really notice any changes too much. It was subtle. And then over a period of, I'd say from the summer of 2011, that would be the beginning of his senior year. He was going to turn 18, so he was going to be an adult. And he began to take Adderall. He wanted to get into some Adderall in December of that year. And then come 2012, he started going to the Cava bar all the time, spending a lot of his money, most of his money that he earned, like cleaning pools for his dad. His behaviors changed in the way that they do with addiction. You know, I didn't want to see it at the time, but there was like sleeping in all the time, secretive behavior, not wanting to spend time with me, which he usually did. And he was anticipating, as I said, going off to college. So we had plans to like go and get stuff for his dorm. Like previously, he was super excited about all of that. And, you know, he worked really hard to get to that place. And now all of a sudden there was this lack of interest in going to college or going to buy the things for the dorm. And so I was finding myself having to go like make lists. Is this okay? Is this what you think you might need? And, you know, he was just totally disengaged with me about anything regarding the future. There was some stealing going on, just, you know, minor things. Like I noticed like some cash around the house would go missing and just some coins, you know, all my coins were like suddenly gone. And so I never paid much attention to it though, because I really thought, okay, you know, I too thought, well, everything he told me this was safe, you know, and being that it was sold publicly like that in a place where anybody could just walk in and get it, I just assumed everything was okay. But then when I noticed these behavior changes, I really thought he was involved with other drugs. I thought, okay, he's doing cocaine. Some of the behaviors were like rapid talking, rapid speech. At times, some of his behaviors were like manic almost. At other times, there would be a slower speech, sort of a nodding off that we were noticing. So by the time he was going to college that June, I was really freaked out.
Right.
I was like, something is really wrong. I was not, you know, I had just had that feeling inside. I lost my son. I mean, because as a parent, when you start to know your son or daughter are addicted to drugs or anything, you begin to the grieving process. Really, that's when the grieving starts, because that person that you knew is no longer there. They're no longer present.
Right. Now, they say, and I'll let you guys chime in on this, they're saying, so it's a very what my understanding is, it's a controversial drug, because there's people that are actually, from what I was reading, there are people who are actually find it okay to use or
proponents of it.
Yeah, proponents of it. And
Marijuana world. world, you know, people are like pro marijuana and against marijuana.
Right. But this has the same effects, if I understand, of heroin, right? Or a lot of the same. It's kind of a opioid type of effect.
It goes across three different classifications. It can be a depressant, stimulant, or hallucinogen too. I mean, it's in excess, it can be a hallucinogen. So
How does that happen, Willie? How can it go for three different classifications? Like, how does
yeah,
that work?
that's a good question.
You know, like, how can you be one or the other or all three? That blows my mind.
Yeah, I know. I know. You usually don't think in those terms of a drug crossing over that many classifications, but
So
again,
It's interesting though, because there is a professor studying this, Dr. Christopher McCurdy out of University of Florida. And he is finding the reason for those classifications. And he has a symposium on YouTube, which I found to be really interesting looking at that, because he goes into the more, you know, structural compounds involved in it and scientific data to back it up. But one of the points that he did bring out in his studies were that was that he found that there were, because it's unregulated, it's able to be tampered with or adulterated with other substances. And that is something that we found with Ian's.
With the manufacturers? Or like
vendors, basically, is what has happened in the US. So you had a product coming into the US that was basically not monitored. And it could come in just through, I guess, through different countries in Asia or wherever. It's mostly Asia that this primarily comes out of, is what we found. And it was coming in packages labeled not for human consumption, similar to the bath salts and the spice, all of that. Well, I don't know if some of the adulteration was taking place over where it was coming from, because at that particular time, like in 2000, maybe 8 to 2014, there were those products, you know, the bath salts and the, you know, all that was happening. So it's hard to know, but now, because it's such a hot topic, there's been a lot more control or pressure by the Kratom Association and the other organizations that are lobbying to protect Kratom, that they pressured a lot of these vendors. Hey man, you know, you got to stop with what you're doing, because we're trying to protect this leaf, this true.
why? I mean, like, who's doing it? What kind of companies are doing this? Are these pharma companies, or are these?
No, it's not pharma. It falls under the guise of like the holistic natural products. So they can't do anything to regulate it, because it's under, you know, the FDA is who I'm talking about, can't really do anything because it's falling under supplement products. So they can't really do anything to control it, although the DEA did step in and say, we are going to do something, because they got recommendations from the FDA. This was like 2016, 17. And they tried to, they said they were going to ban it. And then there was like this huge political force that came forward, like, don't do that. And, you know, there was some discussion. I mean, apparently, like, Nancy Pelosi's son was part of that Kratom Association. And so I have found in this whole situation with my son and coming out publicly and speaking about the sort of Pandora's box, I opened it up and it was a well-kept secret. It seemed like ever since I came out and started speaking about it, I've been told to like shut up, you know, like shut my mouth, don't say anything, almost to the point of death threats and things like that.
By who?
You got a lot of drug dealers in suits, basically that are backing this. This is a $1 billion a year industry. And so, hey, I mean, if somebody wants to take a pop at somebody like me, I'm like, hey, go ahead, because I've already lost the most precious thing in my life. My son was everything to me. And so, these guys, it put a hit. Basically, it hurt them in their pocketbook, I guess, because we started talking about it. And other parents started, coming towards me because I came on the news, and, other parents saw what was out there on the internet. So I've got about 45 of us across the nation that work together to try to do something to create awareness really about the product, that it's not as safe as it's being touted to be.
I'm so perplexed about why, where you said it's $1 billion industry. Are these so these are just manufacturers who are in suits, like you said, or drug dealers in suits. So these are really corporations. Are these the same people who are making, with marijuana, with cannabis? So this kind of falls under the same kind of groups.
I know in the beginning, back, a few years back, there were just anybody could sort of get into that industry. And there were people that, probably sold street drugs that could, sell kratom, get their hands on some kratom, just sell it and start producing it. Now, today, you do have some legitimate, businesses that sell it, I'm sure, that are, just from what I've, learned about, there are some people that sell the all natural kratom leaf ground up. But even as it stands, if you watch the symposium by Dr. McCurdy, he speaks about even in its all natural form, it has different components to it depending on the age of the leaf, and whether you're using the oils from the leaf, the tinctures. There's different strengths and different elements involved with kratom, even in its pure form. But there are legitimate businesses and people out there who are, like the tree huggers or those that sell, the oils, that believe that this has a healing property about it. But my thing really isn't to bash, I really don't want to say, I don't mean to bash people. I really want to say that let's, if this is a product that's going to be out there and there are people that are looking to this for some sort of relief from the opiate epidemic, then let's regulate this. Let's not make this something that can be sold to just any kid or anybody that just wants to go out there and find a natural high, so to speak. Let's do something to make sure that whatever it is that's being sold is safe. It's got ingredients listed on it, the amounts of the ingredients that are in there, and the possible side effects. Why is that so difficult to do? And maybe have some age restrictions on it.
I was going to ask. So there's no, I guess for all you guys, so there is no age restriction there's no age restriction or any kind of
regulation
disclaimers on it.
There's to my knowledge, there's different states. There's about 6 states that have banned it, and it's something it just depends on what. It's almost going by state to state, county, even in counties, certain counties. I believe San Diego County had a ban or an ordinance against kratom. So it just depends on how this sort of problem might have presented itself to a community, and then they might take some action against it. In the state of Florida, it from what I found, it sort of came in through the major part of it was into Florida in the beginning. And so what got me interested in kratom, as far as my son's story, was that my son started coming to me and telling me, hey, Mom, we think at the Kava bar, some of my friends, we think they're putting stuff in this drink. And I was like, well, of course they could put something in your drink. You're going to a place, you don't know what this is in this powder, And he goes, well, we want you to have it tested. You're a nurse, we want you to take it to a lab. Don't you know of some lab that you could have this tested? I'll bring some home. So he was beginning to worry in the beginning too about it. And I said, Ian, I don't know of any place. I'm an operating room nurse, I don't know any labs that test things. So there was that. And then, it's just a lot of different things. Just there's a lot of things with Ian's story that I just knew that, like in particular, after he got addicted in 2013, we had to bring him home from FSU. And he came home to live with me for a little bit, and then he just didn't do anything. He was just like hanging out. I said, you're gonna have to get a job. And he was like, I'm not, I'm trying to get a job. And I could tell he was just floundering. And then, some money went missing. And I said, I was tough, I was tough on him. And I said, look, I love you, but I can't live with you watching you die right in front of my eyes, because he was losing weight and he started showing symptoms like meth. It was like a meth addiction. And he was picking his face and very thin. And this just wasn't my, it wasn't a lot.
Yeah. Was there a rehab, Linda? Excuse me. Was there any talk of
Yeah,
rehab?
there was, but it took 9 months for us to get him to a rehab. In 2013, in January, I brought him home and he went to live with his dad, because I basically told him, I just can't watch you kill yourself, Ian. This is killing me. And he knew I was like crying and I was upset. And so he said, well, I'll just go live with dad. And I said, okay, So he went to live with his dad. And for 9 months, he was out there. While he was there, I sought the help of an addiction therapist who basically helped me to line things up, get organized. If he wanted help, we had things in place. We started looking for treatment centers and detoxes. And we also started going over things like rules and boundaries and what that would mean for me. I'm a person in recovery, but not, codependent recovery. So This is a whole new area for me, but it helped me so much to sort of know the things to anticipate with having a child who was, with suffering with substance use disorder. And so I got the tools I needed sort of in my tool bag, and I was prepared so that when the time came for him where he actually got caught, he was confronted about stealing, his dad's wife's debit card and charging up about $850 in a week, all to a kava bar. That's the point that was his bottom, so to speak, at that time. So we were able to say, we're going to get you into a place. So when we took him to the detox, he tested positive for morphine and codone. That was his 12 panel. And 3 days later on the urinalysis, it was kratom. And there again, like Ian and I were super close. That was one drug screen. The other one was 3 months later, he had relapsed, and that drug screen showed meth, amphetamines, and gabapentin. So, I said to him, after he came out of rehab, and now we're talking as a person in long-term recovery, talking to a new person in, early recovery. And I'm talking, and a mom and a son who were close, who could talk to each other about anything, basically. And I said, Ian, dude, I go, were you doing how did that drug screen show up meth? Were you doing meth? And he goes, Mom, I swear to God, I was just doing crack. And I go, but dude, how did that happen? And he's like, Mom, he goes, okay. He goes, I did cocaine in college. And he goes over the whole list. I tried Molly, I tried ecstasy, I smoked heroin once, I hated needles. So he goes over the whole thing with me. He goes, I never did meth in my whole life, Mom, I swear to God. So it was like, okay, I felt like he's being honest. You know, he wasn't doing other drugs. And that's the big controversy I meet with the public on this issue, because I get bashed by like Joe Rogan and people like that. And there was a documentary, A Leap of Faith, where they totally bashed me like I'm some nut job that, you know, my son was using other drugs and I just didn't see it. No, that's not the case. You know, I felt the truth was coming out with my son and I having this conversation. And otherwise, you know, why would a kid tell his mom all the drugs he used? I didn't know about the ecstasy and the Molly, but there was no judgment. You know, there's no judgment on people that just are trying to find a way of life that really is worth it in the long run, you know. But one of the things I wanted to mention is that I did find out when we waited in that 9-month period that there was the people that owned the Cabo bar in our area had a warehouse in West Palm Beach, and it was on Google, and their warehouse blew up because they were manufacturing inside synthetic drugs.
Okay.
And so that's when I began to go, whoa, you know, there's more going on here than, so there are other drugs, you know. So basically I began to realize my son's had somebody dabbling with his head, you know.
This story kind of reminds me of the story. Have you ever watched the movie The Pharmacist?
No, I haven't.
Yes. Yes.
Because like all these lights are going off in your head about your son that you kind of presumed but had no evidence, and now it's like it's come to fruition, and sadly, you know, your son did lose his life. But yeah, it's and The Pharmacist, his son also lost his life. But what he did was he was relentless, and I truly believe that The Pharmacist is the one that first kind of really ignited the fire of pharma and raising awareness. I don't think that he gets enough credit, you know, on that. But so I went and Mike, I sent you a link via email, and it's in Massachusetts. Kratom is legal to buy and have in your state, but there you go. Look at that. So the green is legal, the red is illegal in your state. The red dot is kratom is banned in your city or county, and the purple is there's pending legislation on kratom. So that's right there. Is that shows you where it is. Like I didn't think it was in Massachusetts, but it is.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
When Ian took his life, if I may backtrack for a second, when he took his life, what were there triggers? What, like, was there a certain incident or something that kind of, you know, like what were kind of the what was kind of the scenario leading up to it? Was he increase his use of kratom, or is it just you know, what were some of the triggers, if you could speak to that?
He did have some triggers, Andy. He had been in a relationship with a young man that, you know, he really cared a lot about. And he told me about him, and they had gotten together. And shortly after that, he had relapsed. And then, of course, you know, the guy wanted to go to California, and, you know, my son sort of wanted to go, and I was like, oh, don't go. You know, I didn't want him to leave the area, but that they broke up. And so that was super hard on him, I know. But so he stayed in relapse. And then, you know, sadly, he had just met another young man who I ended up speaking to after his death. There's also a big, huge thing about me, like being a gay basher and all of this out there.
Right.
But, you know, my older brother is gay, and, you know, I have family members that are really close to me that's very accepted for me. I'm a nurse, you know, I'm not a judgmental person. If anybody that knows me would know that, you know, they would know that I'm not like that. So my son was open with me about, you know, when he came out and everything, and I wasn't judgmental. But this young man that he had just met, like, and they were supposed to get together the day he took his life. That young man, his life was changed, and he ended up coming out to his parents, after we talked and everything. And just after knowing Ian and how critical this was. So there were a lot of different factors that actually were triggers. Yes. Also, my son got, he had to steal for this. He didn't have a job. So that morning, or he went to college, he was trying to get his life back together, and through rehab twice, he was on a college campus rehab. So he was at FAU, he came home, and he was living with his grandmother. Because of the relapse, I wasn't taking him back into my home because of the stealing. And I explained to him, you can go to treatment, we'll get you back in, or you're going to have to figure this out, and I know you can. I love you, and I know you can do this. You'll figure this out. And so he came home that day, and his grandmother had found, some checks were missing. The bank had called her, so there was about $1,700 to $1,700 worth of money missing from her account. And she confronted him. I mean, we're talking about an 89-year-old Swedish lady that really didn't know anything about addiction, was handling this in her home the way that any normal person who had just had money lifted from them would have handled it. And so, there was a discussion, and apparently my son started to cry and said, Mimi, I can't live without this drug. And he got in, he grabbed his keys, and she had his phone, and he went out the door and said, I can't live like this anymore. And it was about a 5-minute drive to the top of the overpass from her house where he dove off of in Boynton. And, it was a strange thing because he drove there, he got out of the car, he walked across the street to the southbound side of the south side of the southbound interstate. So no one would have seen him actually dive off. And he removed his sandals and he dove, onto the traffic. And it was at 3:05 that this happened. So that was basically rush hour. And I remember the medical examiner called me, and I said, oh my God, just tell me, was my son, this was a few days later. I said, was my son hit by other cars? And he said, Ms. Mautner, he goes, that's the miracle of this whole thing, is that not one car hit your son. And He goes, yeah, he landed on his back. He said, you could have had an open casket. And I said, no, I don't want that. And he goes, it was just a miracle. It really was. And so, after here, there were just so many synchronicities involved in this, and the fact that 500 people, actually doctors, I worked with surgeons, stood in line out in the hot sun in July and came to his memorial. There's so many things that just made me realize my son was like a modern day, almost like a messiah, And I said, I got to do something with this. I can't just not do something. And my thing really isn't to, I think it's all turned into more of a spiritual journey for me. I've kind of gotten away from really wanting to have resentment or, go after kratom. I'm in the beginning, I was like that. Yes. But I'm more now I just want to save lives, and I want to give people hope that, yes, if you lose your child, you can live through it. You can, and you have to, because you will make a difference by doing that. And if, I just want to save lives, and the way of saving lives, I work with kids or younger people and just tell my story. I take my story to the rooms and I tell my story, and I don't even know it, but a few years later, a kid will come towards me and go, let somebody that I might have sponsored temporarily and say, it was you that saved my life. And I go, it was God that saved your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Acting as an agent. Yeah.
Kris,
it's just been so cool because that's where I don't really like dealing in the kratom issue anymore, because if somebody wants to sell something that's not healthy for other people, go ahead. You know what I mean? That's your business. But there is another force that is eventually going to catch up with you, in darkness and things like that. So I want to more or less live towards a light and towards hope. And I like living in the solution. I want to offer people a solution. I do not like to live in the problem. And that's where I felt like this Kratom thing was taking me, just constantly living in the problem. So I like to more or less just live in the solution. What do I do now? What do I do as a mom every day when I have to figure out what the new normal is? So what I do is I wake up and I meditate. So I started sharing that on a blog I have on Facebook with other parents. This is what I do. I meditate. I use, Melody Beattie's Language of Letting Go. And, and I send messages through pictures and art to parents so that they can hang on, so they can know this isn't the end. And to kids in early recovery, this is not the end. Here's the solution. This is what you do, So I love that more.
Kris, we got some comments, yeah?
Yeah, so Heather Donahue from the North Shore, I know where she works. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to shout out where she works, but she said that it's coming in, they're seeing it in their detoxes, and that she also said that, some meds can come up as, some prescription meds can come up as meth. So, which we knew, but thank you, Heather, for that.
Yeah,
But
I know Heather.
yes, we do. But so I think that meth, right? Meth was very unrecognized. It was just that drug that people that were gay used. And
Oh yeah, it used to make up less than 4% of the illegal drug use in Massachusetts. It's up around 8 to 10% now.
right. And there was no treatment for it, and there was no detox for it, just like cocaine. You couldn't go into a detox being addicted to cocaine because they didn't have a detox for cocaine. You had
because, quote, there wasn't a withdrawal, so to speak.
Right.
But
right.
it's a brutal withdrawal. I mean, it's
So I think that this is, I think that treatment centers and detoxes and stuff, they have to constantly be evolving. And I think that one of the biggest problems that we see is that they're not evolving, that they're stuck. And until there's a population, until there's a need for detox, for treatment, for understanding, these incidents that, people taking their lives is going to continue to happen until, unfortunately, until somebody recognizes that.
And I think that's where we need to really integrate addiction and mental health is all the way at the detox level, because, anyone that's doing a stimulant, when you detox from a stimulant, you can keep going into a deeper and deeper depression for up to 3 months. The deeper the depression, the higher the risk of suicidality. So, I mean, to say, well, Coke isn't addictive. Well, yeah, no, it is addictive. I mean, it definitely is.
Right. And the scary thing is that everybody's shooting everything. I'll never forget, the first person I started working with, cocaine was something that everybody sniffed or put underneath their lips.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, I'm shooting it. And I'm like, what? It was, everybody shoots everything, and they put it in a spoon, and they'll do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this. And, we were going through in Massachusetts, there was this, they were calling it 5. And they were calling it 5 because people were coming in, had 5 different substances. Not one was bigger than the other, but they have these 5 different substances, from heroin to fentanyl to cocaine to Adderall, all these different drugs mixed in. Detox protocols based on CINA, CIWA, scaling ratings. Hence, we keep persons for 14 days plus on detox. So that's good. So, Heather, we are recognizing these drugs now, some detoxes. I appreciate that comment.
Thank you, Heather. In our closing minutes, Linda, can you tell us about what you're doing today with the foundation? I know you're doing it, but you're kind of changing some stuff a little bit, but tell us about what you've done with the foundation and the fact that you've made some donations and
Well, Andy, part of what I was working towards with Ian's story is that as a registered nurse, we go into practices and settings, clinical settings where there needs to be a continuum of care. And so what you all had mentioned earlier about treatment and detoxes, it's just not enough. And there needs to also be a continuum after treatment, is what I've seen as a nurse. And with Ian's situation, getting out of treatment for the first time 30 days and then 60 days, that wasn't long enough, where Ian's head still had the effects of, his brain was still affected by these substances. And so there needed to be in place some sort of setting where Ian could go and have help to fill out a resume, to have some inspirational classes like yoga or support systems out there, like peer-to-peer support. And so that's what I decided to do with his foundation, was basically set it up or help in some way that we could help fund or build a recovery community center or organization where that would provide for these resources, where parents can go and have peer-to-peer support for grief and loss, for how to navigate through their son or daughter's substance use disorder or misuse times, and also for people in early recovery, for people coming in right off the street, that they have a place they can go like 24/7. That needs to be there. It has to be a component of all of this. It's actually probably one of the most important components, because you have to have support. And with any type of disease process, there's support, there's rehab, or cardiac, diabetes, anything. So it needs to be there for substance use disorder as well.
so that's how you
We help to fund the hub in Palm Beach County, which is it's a recovery community center. They're right now like doing a lot of structural changes inside, and they are going to be the areas, recovery community organization that will help people in our community. We have moms that work, that have lost children, that work with the hub directly to help oversee that. This also helps parents who lost children or who are trying to navigate like where to find an Al-Anon meeting, or how to get some counseling for addiction therapy.
Got it. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that, or not, or don't talk to me, don't call me, but call someone else, call someone.
No, I'm pretty, I work as a nurse. I work in the operating room, and if you're gonna reach out to me, just don't bash me. I'm a person too, and
no, on a positive note, if somebody had a question or a parent or Bob wanted to know.
Reach out to me through Facebook. I'm on Facebook, Linda Mautner, Mautner, and Ian Mautner Foundation we're on Facebook. We're working on a website. I had a website up, but it's kind of it's not doing so great right now. But yeah, we're out there, and we kind of work behind the scenes a lot, and I prefer it like that.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and I wish you guys the best in all that you're doing. Thank you for all that you're doing to help in this, really tragic and deadly disease.
Well, we appreciate it, and this is a drug that needs to be brought into the light as well, with all the other things out there. But this is something that's important, and also with it having some, being legal or available. This is something that we need to talk about as well. So,
right. Thank you.
Well, hey guys, that's our show for the week. How about that?
Thank you, Linda.
Number
Thank you.
5.
Thank
So
you, Kris.
Thank you, Linda.
thank you, and please like us on Facebook.
Yep.
What's our Facebook address, Kris?
The MAP.
MAP.
2020. 2020. And this is our 50th show of the MAP.
How old you are, Andy? 50?
All right, and on that note,
Wish I was 50. Okay.
right. Thank you, Willie. Thank you, Kris. Thank you, Linda. Thanks to Mike Weber back at Mission Control and Foxboro Cable Access Television, and who have been listening and watching the MAP. We'll catch you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Right.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.